Hello, everyone. Our generation is very fortunate to live in a world of discovery. Today, we are able to see what we couldn't before and do what was thought of as impossible. But despite all of our wisdom, we still seem to be oblivious to what is closest to us, our fellow human beings. Humanity can never seem to agree on anything, and this is because we fail to see others' perspectives. Have you ever had an argument with someone where you just could not understand how they could say something so ludicrous? For example, when I was in elementary school, I could never understand why my teacher felt the need to give me so much homework. I think that the reason we can't see others' perspectives can be split into two main categories. Number one, we don't have the context to understand them, or number two, we don't want to. First, let's talk about the context. In your pockets, my pockets, our bags, we all have something that even as recently as 20 years ago would have been considered magic. The innovation of computers, cell phones, and the internet have revolutionized our way of living. I can't go 10 minutes without taking a look at my phone. We depend on them for everything, for communication, convenience, but most importantly, for information. Over the past few years, we have become increasingly dependent on technology for our information intake. Now, this dependence has caused our worldviews to ultimately be shaped by them. But I think that this is a very dangerous idea because with great power comes great responsibility. Unlike hard-copied newspaper or books, the internet is an interactive experience. The internet and its tech companies look at your search results and they know what you like. And there are many benefits to this, right? Amazon will give you the right furniture recommendations that it knows will fit your home and your style. And Google will give you news that it knows you will like. But there's a problem here. If all the news that Google gives you is, let's say, news about Kylie Jenner's new house, what you're not seeing is the 700,000 Syrians who are forced to move out of their homes due to conflict. With our increased accessibility to information comes a sacrifice of our comprehensive view of things. We are receiving more information, but this information has become more targeted. This phenomenon can be described as a filter bubble. The term filter bubble was first coined by longtime internet activist Eli Pariser. He defines a filter bubble as your online universe of information. We live in filter bubbles. These are basically the information, all the information that we get. What is inside your filter bubble is determined by what you like, what type of person you are, and what you do. But the important thing is you don't decide what gets in, and more importantly, you don't actually see what gets edited out. Maybe the reason that you couldn't understand what world the person you're arguing with was living in was because you were living in different worlds. But bubbles aren't that hard to pop, and all it takes is constant awareness and constantly seeking out new perspectives. But just popping this bubble is not enough to solve this issue. Oftentimes, we have the information, but we are still unwilling to accept new ideas. As humans, it is very hard for us to accept new ideas that are alien to us. In psychology, this is called cognitive dissonance. In short, when there is a new piece of information or a new idea that is dissonant with our existing map of how things work or how things are, it creates a dilemma within our minds. And our mind doesn't like that. And so we reject this new piece of information or new idea. Now, this is an effect that acts upon us subconsciously. But when we debate with other people, this effect is aggravated and something worse takes place. Now, I'm sure everyone in this auditorium has at least some idea as to what the term debate implies. Debate is basically a structured argument. I make a proposition, you make a response, and I respond to that response. It's a method of extracting truth. We can imagine the proposition or resolution being debated as a piece of raw metal, and we, the debaters, are the blacksmith. With every round of back and forth, we strike this metal, strengthening it, removing any impurities, and molding it into different shapes, until finally we are left with this beautiful piece of artwork that we can hopefully call the truth. At least this is how debate was supposed to be when it was first invented in 621 BC by the Greeks. As time moved on, although the idea of debate has lived on in modern society, its purpose has digressed. The focus of debate has shifted away from this idea of seeking truth and more towards a form of verbal sparring. I believe that the way modern society converses with itself is ultimately broken because it isolates our mindset. I myself am a debater. I started my debating career back in my old high school up in Michigan. Now, the format that I debated in was called public forum. In public forum, there's usually a controversial topic or proposition that is first put on the table, and then the two teams argue over it. Their ultimate goal is to get the judge to either affirm or negate that resolution, thus granting them the win. Now, starting out as a novice debater, it wasn't very nice. We didn't win any tournaments, and in fact, we actually scored relatively low. But what made it even worse was that oftentimes this wasn't due to a lack of skill on our side, but more due to luck. See, oftentimes in debate rounds, the judge can't actually decide which side should win, and so they just vote randomly. And I think this really reflects our society's definition of debate. Debate inherently comes with a point in nature, right? There is no gray area. Even when a conclusion was not come to or it wasn't necessary, we are still forced to come to a conclusion, for better or for worse. Now, this point in nature is really bad because this is the exact reason how it isolates our mindsets. It's like a defense mechanism. Because there is something at stake here, whether it be a tournament win, money, or your own pride, we ultimately cannot allow the possibility of defeat. And so our minds lock in our ideas and our perspectives to prevent us from swaying. Take my debate example, for example. As a debater, I know that in a tournament, I would never be able to concede my own side. You can call me hypocritical. And this can be applied to many other cases. For example, politicians or lawyers at court. And this is exactly the problem. The way that modern society discusses and debates is essentially broken. We are forced to start with a conclusion and then move backwards from there, marshalling the best arguments that we can devise to make our conclusions come out on top. The goal is no longer to determine the most fair-minded or optimal approach to an issue, but rather to defend a given claim at all costs. It is no longer an exercise in deliberation, but in reasoning with an agenda. Now, there are obviously many problems with this. For one, the politicians, the decision makers of our country, push forward their own points of views by focusing solely on evidence that support their stance, and evidence that threatens their position is rationalized away. Flaws of their opponents are hunted for and magnified upon. We find that this approach is exactly what we find so corrosive in today's politics. This approach ultimately fuels selfish needs and eliminates any possibility for functioning democracies and prevents us from coming to any productive conclusions. But second of all, this isolates us and restricts our views. When we are stuck in such a mindset, we can't see any other arguments other than our own. And historically, if we look back, many disasters are essentially the culmination of people's inability to see past their own ideas. Racism and segregation is a constant struggle for the majority to see from the perspective of the minority. Obviously, we can't just all stop talking, right? That's not the solution to this. And in this chaotic world filled with a cacophony of opinion, disagreement is ubiquitous. We will never be able to truly escape debate because debate seems to be our only solution and resolution to these disagreements. But what we can do is argue with each other in more respectful and productive manners. When we prioritize reaching the truth over winning the argument, society will become so much more productive. And when we have all the information from different perspectives, and always bear in mind to have an open mindset, we will understand each other better, and we will all be one step closer to humanity. Thank you.